I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Jamie here. I'm with my co-host Teresa, of course, and we welcome Paula Gallagher. We are interviewing. Hello, Paula. We're so excited to have you on our show today. Paula is an infertility coach, and she's very passionate about walking with women on the path of infertility. And it's true that we love a good redemption story, whether it's body, mind, or spirit. Like, how can we turn this pain into purpose? So Paula's going to be talking a lot about that today. She struggled with more than a decade of primary infertility and discovering many diagnoses that contribute to her own infertility. And she felt, again, very called to turn what she learned into something that can help others. She also founded her parish's infertility support group, which is amazing. And she offers virtual coaching and shares advice and resources on social media. She lives in Texas with her husband. So again, Paula, we're so glad you're here. Again, you know, often we think about a redemption story with infertility, but what I'm feeling very, leaning into on this episode is redemption doesn't always mean a baby, at the end of the infertility. Body, mind, spirit, what happens to our soul? How do we understand our feminine genius in this process? And so again, Paula, we're so delighted to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So Paula, tell us a little bit about why this journey of infertility has turned a fire a fire on in you to share with others. How many people do you come across every day that struggle with infertility, and why does what you have to share matter to these people who struggle?
Sure. So, my husband and I met in college. We were both from big Catholic families. We were like, that's going to be us. Of course, we're going to have our own big Catholic family. Started trying to get pregnant right away and just never conceived. Had a brief stint with like a conventional OB-GYN who really did not know what he was talking about. And my mom actually discovered Pope Paul VI Institute and was like, I think you need to look into this NAPRO technology thing. So basically over the next decade, we did the NAPRO technology protocol and then some, which was very helpful for finding answers. I can't say we've ever found something that we could point to and say this is the answer. I've been diagnosed with endometriosis, had surgery for that, PCOS, chronic endometritis, thyroid problems. The list kind of goes on. I've had doctors look at me and be like, we don't really know why you're not getting pregnant. We've been able to successfully treat all of these things that we've discovered. Your charts look great. You should be able to get pregnant. And so just living with that still, quote unquote, unexplained infertility. Yes, I have lots of reasons contributing to why I have never conceived, but no one's ever looked at me and been like, that door is closed. And so I've also been very, I guess, blessed to be comfortable talking about what I've gone through over the years. Yes, with family and friends, but also just with, women that I've met. Like I feel like my story is just as valid as someone else's story of their pregnancy. And so by being open, that has kind of allowed other women to share with me like, oh, I'm also having trouble getting pregnant and I don't know what to do. And because I did find NAPRO technology kind of so early on in my own story, and I found charting so early on in my own story, I have been able over the years to kind of point women in the direction of resources, but also to just be somebody who can listen with empathy and to say like, I really get what you're going through. And I have never talked to a woman who has not felt isolated in this journey. And even if they have a support circle who loves them, even if they have, friends who are willing to listen, family who's like invested in them, if there's no one who can look at them and say, I have lived through that, like it really makes a big difference to women who to know that like who they're talking to has also suffered deeply in this very intimate way. So just being able to be a voice, who's willing to open that conversation and to listen and say, I get it because I've lived it, can be really, a big thing for women, even if it's just one conversation, to just know like they have that opportunity to kind of release that experience and to voice it out into the world.
It's really beautiful, Paula. I was talking to a patient last night. This has not to do with infertility, but it will have to do with what you just said. And her husband is struggling with alcoholism. And in that conversation, she was crying and she just like was saying, just, this is so hard. This is so hard. And I looked at her and I was like trying to listen and be compassionate. But I really told her, I said, nobody knows what you're going through except the people who have gone through it also, women who have gone through it also. And I said, you really have to, I think, find the support group of women who have experienced what you're experiencing. So, because I can be as compassionate as I can be, and I feel like I am, but I don't know what that feels like. So I do think this is incredibly important for women to understand that you have to find one person or a group of people or a support network in any way of people who actually have experienced what you're experiencing. And why do you think it is, Paula, that I don't know. And I think this actually still aligns with what I'm saying. I mean, alcoholism, there's personal shame, right? You think, because I don't know of a lot of infertility support groups. Like, I think even in my town, I'm like, oh, I have one piece of paper I can share with somebody. There's a support group down at a church. Is it something that women kind of carry a shame about in a sense, or is it just, why is it so hard to find support in infertility? And why do we not have more support groups for people experiencing this suffering?
I think a lot of women don't. Yes, there's definitely a shame component. I think there's kind of two prongs here that I want to address. One is the shame component, right? Like, especially if you grow up in, a church culture or a community where you're surrounded by, vibrant families, then you just kind of expect as a woman that like, when you get married, you're going to have a baby, like no questions asked, right? It's just going to happen. That was my expectation. I have 4 younger siblings. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Like all of my friends had, they all had families. Like we were a big homeschool group. And I was like, of course, I'm going to get married. I'm going to have babies. End of story. And that didn't happen. And when something that is so intimate as your fertility and your sexuality is dysfunctional, is not working as it ought to, your whole identity as a woman is thrown into doubt. And you're like, I can't do the one thing that as a woman I'm supposed to be able to do. And I don't know why. And I don't know how to fix it. And I just feel broken and betrayed and a failure. And I don't know what to do with that. So there is a lot of shame that's involved in that. There's a lot of sense of brokenness and failure. And so that's a component of it that keeps women quiet because, again, if you're trying to express this to somebody who hasn't also lived it, it's really hard to communicate that in a very compelling, way that's easy to understand for somebody else. And also I think, women just don't understand how common infertility is. Just in the couple past years, like the World Health Organization updated its statistics that 1 in 6 adults of reproductive age struggle with infertility in the world. Like that's a huge percentage. And that's just, it's not commonly known how common it is to have trouble getting pregnant. And so I think that keeps a lot of women quiet. And also just, there's a lot of, if you're in a Christian or Catholic community, sometimes there's a lot of faith or theology aspects tied into that, right? the Bible is like, you're blessed with children. Children are a blessing. There are the olive plants around your table, right? And then there's also kind of this Old Testament idea of you're punished for your sins. And one of those punishments is not having children. And so, then there's this whole other added layer of shame if you are hearing that and you're not also remembering that, Jesus kind of debunks this idea in the New Testament, being like, no, this man was not born blind because of his parents' sin, or the people who were crushed by the tower were not crushed because of their sin, right? So, if you're taking this to your pastor or you're taking this to your priest and you're met with feeling like you're being punished, or God's trying to quote teach you a lesson, or quote things happen for a reason or whatever, and you're not actually met with compassion or understanding or resources, then you're not going to bring it up again. You're not going to talk to anyone about it. And it is hard to find resources. Like, one of the reasons that I started this was because I Googled Catholic infertility resources and nothing came up. Nothing that looked new and active came up. There was maybe like one or two websites that I was like, these look like they're not operational anymore. And, since then, which was like 3 years ago, I've discovered like Springs in the Desert and the Fruitful Hollow and, books. Like, there are resources out there. It's just hard to find them if you don't already know where to look. And that's unfortunate. And, as far as like support groups at like the individual church level or parish level, it's one of those things where unless somebody feels compelled to do it themselves, it's just not there. 3 years ago, I was at a space where my current doctor at that point in time looked at me and was like, there's nothing else to try. Mm-hmm. And, I remember driving home from that appointment and being both like at peace, because I was like, I have been doing this for a long time. Like, I've been doing this for like 10 years. Like, it's not like she doesn't have a point. But also just being like, I don't think that's true. But while I was processing this experience, I very clearly like heard a call from the Holy Spirit being like, you're feeling a lack of support, and there are other women out there also feeling this, and you can actually do something about it. Mm-hmm. And it was very scary. It took me like 3 or 4 months to actually like approach our parish priest and be like, I would like to start this ministry. And, he was very supportive, go for it. So it's been a big blessing. We're fortunately a small group. It's not something you ever want a large group for, but there's about 6 or 7 women. We've been meeting for, over 2 years together now. And it's been really beautiful to walk with these women. And everybody in the group has somebody who has a similar story. Some of us have primary infertility, some of us have recurrent miscarriage, some of us have had stillbirth, some of us have secondary infertility. So it's been really beautiful to grow these friendships, and also to just see them supporting each other through the ups and downs of this.
So beautiful. And the power of sisterhood, the power of community is so healing. I think about Teresa, at the beginning, you were talking about the woman you were talking about the alcoholic husband. And when any kind of pain or suffering, of course, today we're talking about infertility, but how while the community of people that may surround us who don't understand, but they show us love, there's still healing there. But the healing truly, when you are in accompaniment with people who literally can empathize and really understand that pain, I think is so, so crucial. Mm-hmm. So I applaud you for setting up that stage for other women to find healing. Again, body, mind, spirit. I mean, we are an integrative whole. We have an integrative whole, or we are an integrative whole. Something that I think about a lot when it comes to infertility or any physical ailment that we don't have answers for is this lack of peace. Mm-hmm. You had said on the way home, coming from that doctor's appointment, there was a sense of peace, but then there was a sense of like, I feel like there's still stones that haven't been turned over. But I think also there's an element of, there's the woman who struggles, or the couple who struggles with infertility, and they know why for sure. Blocked tubes, or, they had leukemia, or they're on a drug that they are not going to get pregnant. And then there's a group of women who really don't know why. And I think that alone of just not knowing why, whether it's infertility or anything else, that can just drive a person mad. So, Paula, how do you help other women and how do you help yourself with that element of just not knowing? How do you keep yourself from, scouring through the internet late at night, early morning hours? What kind of advice do you give to women and couples who struggle with just not knowing why?
Yeah. There is a balance, right? You do have to advocate for yourself. So there's nothing wrong with doing your own research, bringing ideas to your doctor, asking, hey, I was reading about this. Can we, does this line up with my symptoms? Can we explore it? What we don't want is obsessiveness, right? We don't want this to be a compulsion where it's all you can think about, it's all you can talk about. That's where it becomes unhealthy, right? We don't want to be living from a space of desperation and obsession. And that's a major pitfall of the experience of infertility. So, working with clients, sometimes it's talking about like, I'm getting this feeling that you're operating from this place. Like we need to talk about ways to let go a little bit. And, some of that is focusing on what can you control and not on what you can't control. Because the truth is we can't really control our bodies. We can influence our bodies, but we can't control them. And that is one of the most frustrating aspects of infertility, whether you are still trying to find diagnoses or you're working on a treatment plan and things are just not turning out with the outcomes that you thought they were going to have, right? You can do your best to influence, but you still can't control. And then, the other painful aspect of this is we don't know everything. Science doesn't know everything. As much as, there are some voices in the fertility space that claim to have all the answers, like they just don't. And, being able to acknowledge that there might always be some aspect of unknown and mystery about this, whether that's we never really find out why we have not gotten pregnant, or we got pregnant, but we don't really know what was the thing that kind of like pushed us over the threshold of fertility. So if we want to conceive a subsequent child, we might have to do some of this again in the future. Life is messy, complicated, a lot of it's unknown. And we are just trying to do the best we can with what we have. Our body is trying to do the best we can with what it has. And so we kind of have to remind ourselves to give ourselves grace and mercy, and our bodies grace and mercy, and to just acknowledge that, that's kind of all that's asked of us, is to do the best we can with what we have.
I'm going to pause for a moment for our podcast sponsor, We Heart Nutrition. This is a business, but it's a mission also. We Heart Nutrition is grounded in research and a deep respect for family and a deep respect for you and what you put in your body. We Heart Nutrition supplements are made in America. They are researched, and they really do make a person feel better. They have supplements for every group, every reproductive stage. So prenatal, postnatal, just an adult that needs nutrients, male health as well too. You can get 20% off with our code GENIUS, 20% off at weheartnutrition.com for really, really quality supplements that the Hormone Genius podcast really believes in. Paula, I want to continue to talk about what you said in relationship to we don't know everything in terms of fertility in the area of medicine. And this is very true. However, I do think that we have done a disservice to women over the last 50 years because we don't know everything. And part of it is that we spent so much time suppressing female ovaries that we forgot to figure out how the reproductive system should work and should work in its greatest form. It frustrates me sometimes to think of the last 50 plus years and how it became stagnant in research in the area of women's health because of the birth control pill. And it's not necessarily because people were using it for birth control. It was because we decided to use it for every woman's health problem that ever existed. Like, had it just been, we're just going to only use it for birth control. But no, what doctors did is they decided to use it for everything, every problem that you could ever have with your menstrual cycle. And therefore, we never continued the research.
Mm-hmm.
And now you wake up 55 years later, and like you said, we have 1 in 6 women, 1 in 6 couples, I should say, that are experiencing infertility. And you just kind of have to think, what did we do the last 55 years?
Mm-hmm.
And your statement about your OBGYN kind of not knowing what he was doing, or,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see this all the time. It's like this, like they don't really know what to do. I don't blame them, because I don't think they're taught in medical school how to do a workup in fertility. But it's this classic, like, oh, run a few blood tests and throw Clomid or letrozole at you for 3 cycles. What? Why? I have no idea what I'm doing. And after that, I can refer you
Mm-hmm.
to a reproductive endocrinologist.
Yeah. And that was basically my experience as a newlywed 22-year-old healthy woman. I just looked for like a local OB-GYN. He did maybe 3 blood work tests. We did Clomid. I came back to him and I was like, this has dried up all of my cervical mucus and it's giving me mood swings. And he literally told me, you don't need cervical mucus to get pregnant. And I was like, okay, we are breaking up, because I'm a newbie to charting, but I at least know that you need cervical mucus to get pregnant. And we did like the SHG, and then that came back clear. And he was like, go do IVF. And I was like, are you crazy? I'm a 22-year-old woman. I should not need IVF. Like, this is not, apart from my own personal, like, ethical, problems with IVF. I was like, this is not even common sense. And now 13 years down the road with 5, 6, 7 diagnoses, I'm like, if I had gone that route, A, probably wouldn't have worked, or B, probably would have ended in a miscarriage. So, thank God I was spared that type of experience. But, that's only because I kind of had enough sense of my own, yes, boundaries, but also just like enough sense to be like, medically, this doesn't make sense to not go down that path. Other women who come into an office with zero knowledge of their body, their hormones, no experience of charting, they're just going to trust the expert. And then they'll be like, okay.
Mm-hmm. So frustrating. It's so frustrating. Something else that can be very frustrating, I hear from women who struggle and couples who struggle with infertility, is the chart.
Mm-hmm.
Charting, the relationship with the chart. Also just the reality that going down paths of whatever, like we can get kind of obsessed, I imagine, in life in general. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you learn something because it's the it thing to think about, and then you go down that path and you spend hundreds and thousands of dollars, and then it doesn't work. You pivot, you go down a path hundreds of thousands of dollars later, and it's kind of like pivot path, money, money, money. And so I guess this is kind of 2 questions, I suppose. This idea of being frustrated with charting, and what's your advice for women who struggle? Because it can be triggering for women that I've worked with, even just to see the chart, to look at the chart, to put stamps on the chart, to even think. It's just so triggering, because it almost seems like a symbol. This is a symbol or a signal or a sign that I struggle. There's something going on. And then the second question, again, if you need a reminder later, I'll ask it again. But the second question is, how do you help the woman, or what kind of advice would you give the woman who just is going down all these paths and spending and spending and spending money? Because sometimes, they might hit the jackpot, kind of like going to the casino, it kind of probably feels that way. So yeah, let's start with the chart question. What's your experience working with women who struggle with their chart?
Charting is definitely becomes a hated thing. When you have reached the point where you have enough knowledge where you can kind of interpret your own chart a little bit, okay, we're making these changes, I'm seeing them reflected or not reflected in the chart, then, information is no longer empowerment, it's a burden, because you are seeing in real time what is or is not working. And, charting as a tool is great because you get that information and feedback in real time, and it doesn't take long, maybe 5 minutes a day. So objectively, charting is a useful tool. It's a very minimal time commitment, but the mental emotional burden of charting is enormous. It feels like it controls you. You're looking at your chart and you're like, oh, I'm entering my ovulatory phase. I know, we're going to clear the calendar for the next week because we got to use our evenings because we're trying to conceive. Or, you're looking at the end of your luteal phase and you're like, oh, here come the PMS symptoms. My period's coming early. Our progesterone intervention didn't work. What is going on? This just happened to me recently, right? My period came early, even with increased progesterone supplementation. My very first thought was, I am broken and I will never be fixed. And because I had the knowledge of this is what my luteal phase should be, this is the amount of progesterone I'm taking, right? This is the outcome I should be seeing if things are working correctly, didn't happen, then it's a, immediate downward spiral. It kind of does stick around with you. I was talking with a lady recently who's postmenopausal, never conceived, and she was blessed to adopt several children. She has preteen daughters, and she's like, I'm gonna have to start telling them about their body and their cycle and how to chart. And she's like, I hate charting. She was so upset. She's like, I just hate charting. And she's like, and I have to work through this before I teach them about their own bodies because I don't want to communicate my own frustrations with charting and my own frustrations with my own infertility. And this is years after her infertility journey ended. She was not charting anymore, but the emotional component was still very alive and active. And if it's a situation where a woman has experienced miscarriage, charting can be, very triggering PTSD levels. So it does become a symbol of, yes, it kind of becomes like the next level of our hormones, right? Our hormones are symbols in a sense of the communication of like what's going on in our bodies. And then that gets put on paper. And then you have, in a sense, a summary of your fertility on paper. And it becomes like this medical history on paper. And it might be good. It might not be good. It might, and so it definitely is very emotionally charged. And, in couples where the woman is doing all of the charting, it just kind of adds this other emotional component where, the woman feels like she's doing everything. She's doing all the testing. She's doing all the treatment. She's doing all the blood work. She's the one who's meal planning. She's the one who's researching all the supplements, right? And she's the one who's charting. And then it adds to this component of isolation where it's like, this is all me because it's in my body. I'm the only one who can make the observations. I'm the only one who can, in a sense, like deal with this. And it just adds, it adds and adds. So one of my big pieces of advice for women who are actively trying to conceive is take a break. Like if you have been, actively trying to conceive for 9 or 12 months, you need to take a break. And my general recommendation is 3 cycles, because usually, and by take a break, I mean, you're not charting, you're not taking your supplements, you have no idea what day of the cycle you're on. If you want that cocktail, you drink that cocktail, whatever. You are living as if your infertility does not exist. Because what happens is that first cycle, you're like, I'm on vacation. This is amazing. I feel alive again. Like, 100-pound rock has been lifted off my body. And you realize how infertility has been controlling your life, how it's been controlling your marriage, how it's been impacting everything. And so it's kind of like, it's like the first day out of school when you're a kid, right? It's like you're like elated. And then the second cycle is like, okay, you're starting to like, you realize how tired you are and you're resting. And then you're doing a lot of, self-reflection on, do I want to keep doing this? And then usually by the third cycle, the women who are like, yes, I want to keep doing it, they're starting to feel like they're chomping at the bit a little bit. And that can kind of help them discern like, okay, I'm still invested in trying to conceive. I'm still willing to put emotional energy and time and resources into this. And so it's both necessary to give your body and your heart a break, but also it's kind of a good discernment tool for a couple to figure out, where are we in this journey? Do we want to keep going, or is it time for us to look at other paths forward? And then your second question about pivoting and money, yeah, it's it is often that, right? You start with NAPRO technology and maybe you get some answers, but you don't get a pregnancy. So then you go down like the holistic nutrition route or acupuncture or immunoreproductive doctor. And a lot of it is, it's kind of what we talk about with charting for family planning in general, right? Like every cycle is an opportunity for the couple to come together and discuss, are we trying to conceive this cycle, or are we trying to avoid this cycle? And it's the same kind of rhythm. You pursue something until there's an obstacle, and then it's a moment to reassess. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What are our boundaries? What are our limits? And ideally, that conversation is happening from a calm, not desperate, not obsessive state. And sometimes that's just, okay, we have these ideas. We're going to proactively say, in 4 months from now, we're going to stop and we're going to reassess what we've learned, what we've spent, where we're going, and then we're going to make a decision at that point about what to do next. So, just kind of having some of that self-awareness to know that this journey can become all-consuming and take so much money and everything else, and just being able to kind of put limits on yourself as a couple and say, okay, we're going to do it for this amount of time, and then we're going to reassess.
I found myself, Paula, like back when you mentioned that, your cycle, you had done all the extra progesterone and then your period came and you felt broken. Mm-hmm. I found myself getting emotional, like overwhelmed by that, experience for you. It is a deep sadness to have that reality. And it makes me think of Dr. Marguerite Duane and our last episode we just did with her. She wanted to title it, "I Got My Period." Mm-hmm. And how that statement actually means different things to different people, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you got your period, and it can be a joyful thing because you haven't had a period in 8 years. But the reoccurrence of the period for someone who's been struggling, and especially for as long as you have, I thought about, like, again, it just made me feel like compassion. Like, that is such a suffering to have that reoccur over and over again. And I also think everything you're saying, I imagine, just because I've worked with so many patients in your shoes, like you, like all nodding their heads and just going, yeah, this is the story of my life. Mm-hmm. This is what I feel, the hate of the chart, do I just keep doing this anymore? Mm-hmm. Is it ever going to happen for us? Yep. All of those things. And again, because the period is reoccurring, it just is this constant reminder of that. And I'm just saying, I just such a deep empathy for you in that experience, Paula.
Thank you.
And for all of you out there who are experiencing that. And I just want to replicate what you're doing. Also, I want people out there who maybe had felt something in their heart like you did, maybe I could be helping other women who are experiencing what I'm doing. So how can we, if anybody out there is feeling kind of like, oh, maybe I could do something like this, mm-hmm. how would you suggest they start an infertility support group? Just give them like simple, practical ways that they could just do this.
Sure. I think there's two kind of paths you can take. One is to do something that's like a structured small group. So Springs in the Desert has some curriculum, some like small group curriculums. So if you want something that's like guided and like kind of all the materials already prepared for you, that is an option. What my group liked, I tried to do kind of like a more structured thing at the beginning, and they weren't there for that, which is fine. Like I'm there to serve their needs. And so, I kind of went about this in a very DIY sense. I just, I reached out to the parish priest on my own. I was like, I have this idea. Here's what the need is. This is what I plan to do. And so, my group meets once a month, and every month we do a craft. Because in my experience, when you are spending all of your time and emotion on trying to get pregnant, all of the fun, joyful things that you were doing fall by the wayside. Fun crafts and hobbies, gone. And part of reclaiming balance and reclaiming some joy in your life is re-engaging with those hobbies, which for me was a lot of like artsy, craftsy type stuff. So we do a craft every month. This month we're doing cross stitch. Next month we're going to do painted pumpkins. And and then it's just, we basically just sit around my dining room table and we socialize and we talk and we share what's going on in our lives. And, we follow up on, hey, you had that appointment last month. How did it go? Or you were really concerned about this, aspect last time, and just, we're just doing life with each other, at this point. So it's very low key, somebody brings a snack or bakes a cake or something. And, at the end, we close in prayer and we lift up each other's, prayer intentions. And I really love Canvas. I usually make like a little prayer card with an uplifting verse on it, Bible verse for the month, and everybody, takes that home. So it's really up to you. What do you feel comfortable putting together? And the big thing is, you don't have to have all the answers as the leader. You are there to organize a time and a space, and you're kind of there to facilitate. You don't have to, I'm in a position where I've been doing this long enough where I can offer some level of mentorship to other women, and help get them connected to resources. But you don't have to. If this is on your heart, like if you see the need and it's on your heart to fill the need, like go for it until there is a obstacle in your way that cannot be moved. And it can be what you make of it. Really, I can't emphasize enough, like you do not have to have all the answers. Like you are just there to facilitate and to organize and to like kind of in a sense make it happen and to be the hostess. And we are all really helping each other through this season of life.
I'm sitting here just thinking about how much courage it takes to step out and do this. It takes work and time, but that just shows that, again, when there is this prompting, in your heart, that when you do it, there's fruit that's born, you know? And so I'm just thankful that you did step out in courage and let your parish priest know that this is what you want to do, and that there's fruit that, of course, is coming from it. So that's how you know you're on the right path, which again, I think is incredible, Paula. So today you talked about your story. You gave some tips. I love the tips of how when women are really struggling, just take a break from their chart, for 3 months. And I love how you broke down like the first month, this is probably what's going to happen. The second month, the third month, that's incredible advice. And then also what you shared about like reevaluating, like discussing with your spouse, like let's try this for 3 or 4 months. This is the amount we're going to spend, this, that, the other thing, but coming together and having these like little meetings, and that's a whole other avenue that maybe someday will go, which I think would be helpful. Like the men in this scenario, how they suffer, how they struggle with their own, sense of almost of loss or of unanswered questions. But that'll be another episode, hopefully someday in the future. So Paula, as we kind of come to the conclusion of this episode, I'm going to ask you the question I ask every guest on our podcast. What do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
I think it's a good reminder that dysfunction is the price that we pay for survival. And just because you are experiencing dysfunction now doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be for forever, right? So we can, in a sense, in a very weird sense, have some gratitude for our dysfunction because it got us through whatever it was that we lived through up to this point. But now it's no longer serving us. And now we're being called to take some responsibility, to make some changes, to try and heal that dysfunction. And that's what we can focus on. And the good news is our bodies are always changing, right? There's always capacity for healing. We don't have to stay with the dysfunction. We can always keep moving forward.
Paula, how can I just tell us a little bit more about, again, your particular support group? I know you're keeping it small, but just give us the details of how you said you give resources a lot about infertility, books and resources. So how would people get access to that information? I know also you're doing some work for Facts About Fertility. We just had Dr. Dwayne on. You might mention that, and just any social media handles that you have.
Sure. So I have two websites. One is called CatholicInfertilityResources.com, and that's kind of my collection of all of the information and resources that I have gathered over the past 13 years. So there's a tab on there for like books and articles. There's a tab specifically for men, resources for men. There's tips on coping. There's like testing recommendations for infertility, for current pregnancy loss. So, you can take these things to your doctor, especially if you like haven't gone through this whole list. There's lots more on there. My second website is CatholicInfertilityCoaching.com. So if you're looking for some one-on-one support, I offer virtual coaching. And then I do share multiple times a week on Instagram. And my handle is at catholic.infertility.coaching. And so that I share a lot of my personal story there and memes and just insights into, what it is to live through this and try and share some of the wisdom that I've gained over the past 13 years. And then, my full-time day job is with Facts About Fertility. So if you are somebody who is maybe new to charting, or, you've moved somewhere and you were looking for a new provider, feel free to reach out. We can help get you connected to those resources. That's one of my favorite things about my position there is I get to answer the main phone line. So I feel like in a way, I get to use my experience of going through all of this to, help women that I've, never met, will probably never talk to again. But like, I can be like, yes, this is the information that you need. Here are some resources. Here's some doctors. Give them all a call, see who's accepting new patients, and go from there.
Awesome. And I'm sure this is just, it's obvious to me, but it may not be to others, that even though your title is Catholic Infertility, this is open to everybody. These
Yes.
resources would apply to anybody with infertility. Facts About Fertility, their resources are available to everybody. So just know, if you're out there, you've been suffering, there is support. And Paula is showing us that there is going to be more support, right? Because this story will create a ripple effect, as Jamie often says. Like, it's the ripple effect that we want to have happen. That's why we want people like Paula speaking out on our podcast, because it creates a beautiful community of women empowering other women. So Paula, thank you for being on the show today. And we'll continue to keep you and your husband in our prayers, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. I've been so honored to be here.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.